So good morning. I think it's you and me, Pat. So good morning. Almost didn't make it this morning. Um, got trapped doing some other stuff. Anyway, those of you again who look at the thumbnail, same thumbnail as the other day on Tuesday when I wanted to talk about people who've influenced me, and really what I wanted to talk about is we're doing a series in church on how to talk, and I really wanted to talk about the power of words. And again, I got to change this. I don't know. At least what I'm looking at, there's a big glare. Sometimes that light behind me. So anyway, hope you guys are all doing well, and want to chat about really words. I talked on Tuesday a little bit about influence, and hi, Stella. And on Tuesday, I talked a little bit about what I wish I had known. Hi, Chris. Oh, okay, good. I'm glad. Thank you. So anyway, I don't want to talk about the power of words. What I was going to talk about Tuesday about influence and just the significance of words and how much our words can mean to other people. And really, our words are not just, it's not just the sounds coming out of our mouths. It's not just what words mean, but it's really the influence that comes from words and how significant those words are. Because hi, Rox, the words really often are it's more than just what they mean to your ears, but sometimes it's what words can do for our souls and kind of our being. So I want to tell you two quick stories about me and how I was influenced by two teachers when it comes to words. And I'm going to be talking about this probably for a couple days. But first of all, I want to talk about both of these were high school teachers. One of them was a woman named Mrs. Cockle, who was my high school English teacher. I think I had her just about every semester in high school, Lancaster McCaskey, where I went to high school, McCaskey High School. And early on, Mrs. Cockle was a pretty demanding teacher. And honestly, I was not the best student. I was fortunate that I didn't put a whole lot of effort into school. I was not a hard worker. But I was fortunate that I ended up with a good group of kids. And Mrs. Cockle, for whatever reason, no way was I her star pupil. But she pulled me aside one day, actually along with several other students. This was in probably 10th grade, which was then the first year of high school. It wasn't, in my day, it wasn't 9th grade where you started high school. Good morning, Mom. She pulled me aside, and she, along with two or three other students, and she said that she was the leader of the high school speech and debate club. I had no idea what that was. I didn't even know there was such a thing. But she said to me, "You should do this." And I understood by that. I mean, I was not a deep thinker, but I understood by that what she was saying was, you can do this. You have the ability to do this. And so, kind of on a lark, I guess. And I think also just because I liked being busy, I liked doing things, not just sitting around. I signed up for the speech and debate club. And this wasn't something that you had to audition for or try out for. If you wanted to do it, you were part of it. And I don't even know if these things still exist. I don't know. Those of you who have kids in schools, there's such a thing as a speech and debate club. But we travel. You would actually travel to other schools, and there were categories. Like you could do a persuasive speech. You could do a debate where you had to, provide facts and prove a point, whatever. And I think I did. And then there was informative speeches. I think I did, to be honest with you, I chose the easiest one. And I think I did an informative speech. And you pretty much did the same speech all the time, week after week, which meant you constantly could be refining what you were doing. I don't think I ever did again because I wasn't a star pupil. But one of the things that I learned from just participating in this speech and debate club was I learned that I actually could do it. Like everybody else, the idea of talking in front of people is not something that I look forward to doing on a Monday morning. It's not high on my list of things that I like to do. I think, as you've probably all heard before, when you ask people their fears, talking in front of a group is usually everybody's number one fear. For whatever reason, it just makes us really uncomfortable. And I'm the same way. It's not something I look forward to doing. But what I learned from Mrs. Cockle's speech and debate class was that it's something that I could do. And in that speech and debate class, I learned, hey, I can do this. And as much as I didn't like standing in front of a group of people, it's also something that I found that I could enjoy doing, because I discovered that you can actually impact people with a simple thing like words. Now, Mrs. Cockle was also, she was very honest in her evaluations. For example, in my senior year, she grabbed me and said, hey, you need to try out for the class speech at graduation. And she sat me down and she gave me some pointers. And she said things like, do not use, the trite phrases that everybody's tempted to use, like this is not an end, this is a beginning. And that was a time in my life, my senior year, when I was wrestling with Christianity. You're at that stage of life where you're trying to decide either this is going to mean something to me or I'm not interested. I wasn't interested in just, kind of walking the fence like I had been doing for much of my school year. And so I wrote a pretty short speech on my faith. And I talked about, because I was also on some sports teams in high school, I used Paul's image in Corinthians about Paul running a race. But I don't remember the time limit for this speech. But when I had finished it, I realized that I was short by about 3 minutes. And again, being somebody who wasn't like a real hard worker when it comes to school, I thought, oh man, I got to find 3 minutes for this speech. And so I just wrote some trite phrases, one after the other. This is not an end, it's a beginning, And that's what I did for my speech tryout. Mrs. Cockle at the end pulled me aside and actually told me she was disappointed. She said, you did exactly what I told you not to do. You use those trite phrases. And she says, people who use the trite phrases never, you're not going to get picked to give the graduation speech. And I really learned to appreciate that about her, that she had, when she told you this is something that you can do, what she meant was, this is something you need to put effort in. And she was setting the bar high. She had high expectations for you. And she let you know that. And she did that with words. And what was interesting about that is all because of that speech and debate class that I joined in, like 10th grade, and went around, with these contests, high-end giving speeches. It was something I grew comfortable in doing. And I went to college, and at Messiah College, everybody, again, I don't know if this is still true in colleges, but one of the classes that everybody had to take was a class called Oral Communications, in which, you learned, again, the art of talking, not just in front of people, but just having conversations with employers and employees and, teaching in classrooms, etc. But I had this oral communications class. And because I had spent 3 years in high school with Mrs. Cockle, who had high expectations, doing speech and debate, I did pretty well in that oral communications class. Good morning, Marianne. And several people who were in that oral communications class with me, we were also part of a ministry team at Messiah College. I don't remember the name of it, but a lot of us, when you go to college, when you're a freshman, those of you who guys lived through college, they encourage you to sign up for, um, various organizations, get involved was the message. So I was on a ministry team, and several of the ministry team members were in my oral communications class. And what we were doing every week, that ministry team, we would go to a different church. And most of these were relatively small churches. And we would do a presentation every week. And it involved singing. Sometimes it involved little skits. But there was always one of the members of this ministry team would do a little presentation. I guess you would call it a mini sermon, 10 to 15 minutes long. So we would rotate that responsibility. Each week a different person on the ministry team would do the part of that short presentation. None of us liked doing it, again, because nobody likes standing in front of people. But several of the team members were in my oral communications class. And at one of our ministry team meetings, they kind of said, you know what, they pointed to me, they said, you're good at the speaking part. You do really well in oral communications. So why don't you just do the presentation every week at these churches? And so I kind of got roped into doing that. And every week, I did the little mini message for our presentation at these churches every week when we were traveling around to a different church. And, obviously that led in a very straight line to me. Hi, Stella. So it makes a difference, Stella, like you're pointing out with Samantha. So what Mrs. Cockle did to me in 10th grade when she pulled me aside and said, you should do this. This is something you should do. And she had high expectations for me when she meant that. Starting with her, there's a very straight line in my life to growing comfortable with this, with the preaching aspect. And very much, a 10th grade English teacher made a real big difference in my life, because she really kind of was one person who set me on a trajectory into pastoral ministry, all because, she pulled me aside one day and said, you should do this. And she meant by that, you can do this. And those simple words, it wasn't just the meaning of the words. She was also communicating expectations, and she was communicating hopes, and she was communicating confidence. And it made a huge difference. And step by step by step, Mrs. Cockle led me on a path, along with other people and along with other influences, and obviously the influence of God, but led me on this path towards where I am today and what I've spent my lifetime doing. Another teacher, I'll do another teacher, a guy named John Long, who was in industrial arts teachers back in high school when kids actually had shop classes. I don't know if that's still true. I know when my kids went to high school, there were not shop classes, and that's a shame that shop classes have been dropped. But in 10th grade, I signed up for a drafting class. I don't even remember. I remember the very first class in drafting. For whatever reason, the class was too full, and they looked for volunteers to switch to another class. And honestly, like I said, I wasn't the best student. I just didn't work that hard. It wasn't high on my list. And I didn't care. So I signed up, and for some reason, I ended up in a class that I never would have taken, didn't even know what it was. But it was kind of a graphic design class. And John Long taught the class. And I absolutely loved that. And so every semester in high school, I would take a class with John Long. It was more, I was attracted to what he was teaching more than the actual subjects. I took some photography classes. I took some classes in graphic design. I took classes in printing with John Long. And he actually, he pulled me aside one time and said, we have a summer painting business and we think you would be a good employee. And I ended up painting for John Long. He had a company, Huber and Long. I painted for them for quite a few years and then ultimately started my own painting business. But again, it was that sense of, with his words, he was inspiring confidence, that sense of, you can do this. Interestingly, in that class, in John Long's industrial arts class, those printing classes, there was this A.B. Dick 360 printing press, and John Long did all of the printing for McCaskey High School. And as part of our class, some of us learned how to run that printing press. And eventually, John asked me if I would come down during every study hall, if I'd be willing to do that, come down during study halls and do all of the printing on that A.B. Dick 360 printing press for McCaskey High School for all of the teachers. This was post-mimeograph. Those of you of a certain age, you remember the mimeograph machines and that smell. We'd smell the mimeograph papers, and I don't know if it was good for us or bad for us, but this was after that. This was the next iteration of printing. And all the teachers had everything printed on this A.B. Dick 360 printing press. So I learned how to run it and did all the printing. So I went to college, and in college, one part of financial aid is what they called work study. And probably a bunch of you did work study or whatever it was called then. And they'd give you a job on campus, and that job was part of your financial aid package. And most of those jobs, you didn't get a whole lot of hours. I was assigned 4 hours a week for my work study job. And, I remember on the little checklist where they ask about what you want to do, mow lawns or whatever you did. I remember checking off the printing department just because I had some background in that. I remember walking into the printing department on the very first day, sat down with a guy named Michael, who was the boss, the supervisor, the adult who ran the printing department, did all the printing for the college. And we were sitting down there, and he asked my background. He asked, what can you do? What's your experience? And of course, they had an A.B. Dick 360 printing press sitting right there. And I said, well, I can run that. And he looked at me and he said, he didn't believe me. He said, you know how to run that? And I said, yeah, I ran it during high school. And I didn't think it was such a big deal, but he was really surprised because up until that point, most of the students who had a job, again, you're only working 2 to 4 hours a week. Most of the students, what we did is we did the gopher kind of work. We would do all the collating, stuffing envelopes, stapling, delivering all of the printed stuff to all over campus. It was not stuff that it was just boring work. But they never really had given thought to the fact that you could actually use students to do some of the more technical work. So he walked me over to that A.B. Dick 360. I remember that. He walked me over and he kind of said, show me. He just didn't believe me. So I did everything he needed to do. Made the master, all that kind of stuff, and started running the press. And he was actually kind of blown away that a student knew how to run this thing. And he actually finagled. What he did is he said, I need you here more than 4 hours a week. So with the financial aid office, he finagled my package and he got me a job working 20 hours a week in the printing department. I did that all through college, did a lot of the printing for the college in the printing department because I knew how to run the press. And interestingly, the cool thing about that is that when they started to realize that they could use students for some of this stuff, they started teaching other students to do a lot of the graphic design and a lot of the printing down in the printing department. But all that started, with a guy named John Long, who simply, with his words, was always saying, you can do this. And he too had these high expectations that he communicated to us. and did things that other teachers didn't do simply because he had confidence in them. Teaching them to run the printing press, for example, that did all the printing. John also, both John and Mrs. Cockle, both of them wanted me to be a teacher. And when I went to college, I was still painting, so I was always in contact with John Long, still painting for him through college. He would actually have me come in and teach classes to his high schoolers. I remember I taught some classes on photography. But again, just by doing that, just by saying, I want you to come in and I want you to teach some classes, he was saying, he was building confidence by doing that. And with his words saying, this is something you can do and something you should do. And, I've always loved teaching, and I've come to understand that that's what I do. Not so, if there's a difference between preaching and teaching, it's more teaching that I do. But they did that with words. These two people who were so influential in my life, they did it with their words, not just with the words, not just the sounds you're hearing, but the idea that the words inspired confidence, and the words set expectations. And they said, you can be this, you can do this. And I think of Jesus, who did that, with Peter, when, Peter, who was, suffered from this foot and mouth disease, just constantly sticking his foot in his mouth. Jesus took this guy and he said, you shall be called the Rock. It was like, it's like naming Peter Rocky and giving him that name, Rock. And just with his words, Jesus is inspiring confidence in Peter. And you look at what happened to Peter post-resurrection, when Peter really became the foundation of the church, the early church. It was Peter who preached the first messages, and Peter who led the church in its earliest days. And I often think that was because of the confidence that Jesus inspired in Peter with words. So that's something that we can do, and I wish I was better at it too, but we can inspire confidence in each other with our words. And it's so important for us to be able to do that, to set the bar high with expectations, and to tell people, this is what you can be. This is this is who you are and who you can be with our words. And I'm so grateful to people who've done that for me, continue to do that for me. And that's something that we can do and be for each other as well. So I know Estella sent me one little story about a woman who was influential in her life, a woman named Alice Schofer. And again, encourage anybody else to do that, to think about who's been influential in your life and how. And my guess is that the people who've been influential have been influential with their words. Their words have made a difference in you. And that's, what we can do and be. So let me pray. Talked a little bit too long. And then I used words a little bit too long. And then we can get on with our day. God, I thank you. In my life, I thank you for people like Mrs. Cockle and John Long, who with their words, I know were such an influence in my life and really directed the course of my life. I know, God, that probably everybody listening, we've had people who've done the same thing. I pray, God, that we'd be conscious and aware all the time of the power of our words. God, this is such a difficult time for us, and it's so easy for us to slide into words that are destructive and hurtful to other people, or can even cause anxiety and worry. So I pray, God, that we would be people who understand that through the power of words, we can be inspiring confidence and giving people hope. I pray, God, that you'll help us to be able to do that, to be aware of that. And I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, everybody. Hope you guys have a great day, and love you all, and see you tomorrow.